My pleasure.
And
Okay.
we are recording this for our friends at Madison Central High School, Germantown High School, and Original High School as well.
All
And
right.
we've looked at your website. We've looked at your reel on YouTube, some of your highlights from years past, and we're talking about the Arts AV Communication Career Cluster. So, obviously, me and you are a lot older than everybody watching now and watching later. So, why don't you give a brief synopsis of your resume, because it is quite impressive.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with you. I love your presence on Facebook and how you show up. You are a staunch advocate, and I want to recognize that. Make sure that your kids know that. Yeah, so I have been in sports and media since I was about 4 years old. I started modeling when I was 4. I started running when I was 6, and I started in television when I was 9. So I have been in some way entangled in that world for quite some time.
Well, you're quite humble in the way you explain things, because you definitely ran in the 1988 Olympics.
I
Um,
was.
I've been on ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, NBC Sports. I've interviewed everybody from Terry Bradshaw to Barry Bonds to Denzel Washington, and we got to wake up with you every morning.
Denzel.
Yeah, we got to wake up with you every morning with Jay Crawford and Kid Hoover for several months as well. So,
Yeah.
you've been at the forefront of the media world, but like you said, like in our conversation we had, you combine your love of sports with your love of television and created a career out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, to go back to the early days, I started in television when I was 9. And when I was 13 years old, I was running in an event called the Arco Jesse Owens Games. So Jesse Owens is the legendary Olympian who won gold in Germany in quite a mythic fashion back in the day. And I loved him. I just thought he was an incredible person, a wonderful ambassador for the sport and really for Black people around the world. And so the first time I competed in the event, I ran the 100. And the 100 is not necessarily, I think Stephanie's on our link, is the 100 is not necessarily my everyday event. So when I came back the next year, I didn't make it to the finals that year. I'll back up and tell you that. I didn't make it to the finals. So when I came back the next year, I was on a show in California. I actually did 2 shows. One was called Kids Watch, and it was kid reporters, and one was called Just Kidding. And so for Kids Watch, you would go out and talk to kids and other newsmakers, but you talk to them from the kids' perspective, essentially. And so for the Jesse Owens games, I told them, I said, look, I'm going to do the high jump this time. And I know I can win the high jump. High jump is my first love. So I know I can win the high jump. I want you guys to give me a crew in Los Angeles, because I lived in San Francisco. I want you to give me a crew in Los Angeles so that I can interview Mr. Owens after I win the event. They were like, that's a lot of contingencies going on there. But I was clear about what was possible. So I talked them into it. They dispatched a crew, and you see these, grown folks coming out here talking about, we're supposed to follow this kid doing what? And I won the high jump. And so when I got done and they did the whole award ceremony, put the medal around our neck, and then later on that night, there was a banquet, so we would get to sit at this table. But when I got my medal, I said, Mr. Owens, I have a camera crew here, and I'd like to interview you for a show that I do in Northern California called Kids Watch. And he kind of looked at me. He said, you have a camera crew here? I was like, yep, right over there. So he was like, okay, let's sit on the high jump pit and do this interview. And so we sat on the high jump pit, did the interview, and that was in June, I want to say 70, maybe 8.
Wow.
In September of that same year, there was word that Mr. Owens had cancer. and he was leaving the hospital. And it was kind of one of these things. I know your kids are media kids, so they understand that you have B-roll that runs. And a lot of times you have the reporter talking about what you're seeing. And so there was B-roll of him leaving the hospital, getting in his car and leaving. He didn't stop to talk to the press. And that was the last time that he was seen. And so the interview that I did with him ended up being the last feature interview that he did.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I've always had a deep belief that one, you know, sports and media really are, it's entertainment, and they kind of go hand in hand. But I was taught really early by my parents that the only thing you have is your name. You know, other things will come and go, different titles, whatever else, but what you have is your name. And if I did right by my name, did right by the name that my parents gave me, my community and people that invested in me, that I would always, always be okay. And so it's always been really important to me. One, I love people, so it's an easy thing to do, but to be really reverent of my relationships. They're sacrosanct. I love people, and I value them. And I think it shows up in the work that I do, and how I've been able to stay in sports and media for all these years.
That's awesome. Now, we do have some our multimedia academy watching this as well. But the group I have are ninth graders, and so if somebody wanted to get into television, and you talked about the camera crew, you know, everybody sees the person on camera. What are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes where people can make great careers and they're never seen on camera?
Man, that's a great question. And it's an important question because as the on-air person, people think that it just sort of magically happens. But you have producers, you have executive producers, coordinating producers, line producers, you have cameramen, you have sound people, you know, I should say camera people, because women do it too. Depending on the type of show, you have a director and people that are working all elements of the story and the show to bring it all to air. I always believed as a reporter, it was important to make sure that whoever my producer was as knowledgeable and invested in the story as I was, because at the end of the day, it was my face that was out there. So I needed to make sure that they were doing their job so that when I was on camera, it came off well, that I was able to represent myself, represent my community and my company well, and to do right by the subject. You know, even when you have a story that's contentious or something like that, you never have to paint somebody into a corner. I always believe, you know, you give a person a rope, you either see if they're a cowboy or if they hang themselves, but you have nothing to do with that. It's
Absolutely.
their rope, and what they do with it really, really does give you the indication of how that story is going to come to fore. So yeah, there are many roles in everything that you see that comes to air. There are many roles to get that there. And even as a viewer, the things that you watch matter, because every time you watch something in real time on television, and I know you guys are in the ninth grade, so you probably don't do that. I don't do it much anymore myself, but every time you watch something in real time on television, or if you watch it later on DVR, or you watch it on what's called a second generation device, they're making money. There is a tick every time that happens.
Yep.
And so for me, knowing that, and knowing that for many years, I didn't watch, and I don't watch shows that don't reflect a diverse outlook. And understanding that, like if it's a family show, you're going to have a family. That family may not have diversity in it. That's fine. But if you're watching like Friends or Seinfeld or some show that's in a major metropolitan area, if you don't have any people of color that are part of your friend group, you're not getting my ad dollars. So understand this, especially if you're interested in working in media, that there is a lot of power. There's a lot of power in how stories come together and how shows come together. And even as a viewer, you have power. Okay. So understand that.
Yeah, and in the past, and I'm really good friends with one of our local news anchors. But one thing that she has said, and we also have another one that's he's visited us before as well. Even the person on camera has to have some sort of technical skills and writing skills, especially now with
Absolutely.
the websites and things that news are putting out, and even on the sports side. So
Mhm.
even though you got to be ready to be lights, camera, action at any point, what are some of the technical skills that a person on air would have to have in the media field?
Man, you are killing it with these questions, Greg. I love it. Okay, so here's the dirty little secret. I did my internship in television. I worked in television, like I told you, as a kid. When I went to college as an NCAA athlete, I could not do anything that was associated with my face and branding because it was
That's
considered,
now.
yeah, NIL, man. If
Oh
they
yeah.
had name, image, likeness when I was a kid,
Oh man,
shoot.
that's it.
Yeah, but in any event, so when I came back to television, I was already married with two kids. My kids were 2 and 4 years old. My ex-husband was a baseball player, and when he retired, he went into coaching and managing. And we went to Huntsville, Alabama, when he was the manager of the then Huntsville Stars.
Yep.
And so I have a marketing background, which is also another part of television. We'll get to that in a minute. So when we went to Huntsville, I couldn't do what I was doing in San Francisco. So I said, hey, let me re-engage with television and see if I love it as much as I did when I was a kid. So I called around to the different stations. I was able to encourage, really, I bugged the station manager to death at the CBS affiliate to give me an opportunity to intern. So as an intern, I was not being paid for my effort, but dress for the job you want. So I treated that job as if they were paying me in gold bullion. And I went in every day, hair, makeup, the whole 9 yards, got my suited and booted. But when you work at a smaller station, you do what's called shoot, write, edit, report. Okay. So I carried the camera out to my husband's baseball games, set up my sticks, set up the shot, got the different shots that I needed. I did my stand up on camera, like literally press go, get in front of the camera, do my thing, go back on the other side, press stop, and then I edit it.
Wow.
But you take that back to the studio. I would write my story. A lot of times I would write the story as I was watching the game so that, I got all of the noteworthy plays and I would make sure that those things were included in the story themselves. But when you're putting what's called a package together, it's generally 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And actually now they're shorter sometimes. So it's not just being able to write. Writing is important, but writing for television is a little bit of a different skill. So you need to be very judicious in the words that you use. You may not be able to give a long description. So how can you give that really impactful description with just a few words? The brevity of words that you use was important. And so to have a real mastery of the English language helps you to be able to convey your point and have people understand you quite easily, quickly, so that you can get everything in that you want to get into this package. So as a reporter, to be able to write was super important. If you're doing long form writing, if you're writing because you're communicating with your peers or your supervisors, because everything that goes out is a representation of who you are, how you think, and how you convey those thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Go.
work that you guys are doing right now in school, you can even watch television shows. And I promise you, if you start to research how packages are put together, you will see that same cadence as you're watching different programming, just in general. And it will help you to start thinking and seeing as a television producer, which a reporter is also. You are also a producer. If you are not producing your pieces or having a real hand in it, you're doing yourself a disservice, you're doing the subject a disservice, and the outcome, the result is never as robust as if you are really, really involved in producing it.
Yeah, and you also talked briefly about the marketing side, and we just watched a video before you came on about it's important to know your audience, to know your target market, not only as far as viewership, but as far as sales as well. So how important is that when it comes to reaching the audience? Because without the audience, television and radio people have no job. So
Exactly.
how important is that to reach the viewer and reach the target market when it comes to the sales side of it?
Yeah. So if you think about the old days when they had soap operas, so they still exist, but they called them soap operas because the goal of television was to sell whatever that product was. So you have sponsors that come in and they pay a healthy sum for you to market their products. And there's a lot of different ways that that can happen. So depending on the type of programming that you're doing, if you're working in news, the marketing side of it is a little more specific. Like you're not going to have a whole bunch of product placement where you may have something on the set that says, this is a Coke can. Coke paid for that to be there. Okay. But you can go out to the community and you can sell the segments. So sometimes if you're watching the news and it says the weather is brought to you by Google, whatever, then Google has paid to sponsor that. And in exchange, they'll probably have a commercial that will run, and they're going to want you to put out the very best product, because if that segment is great, if that weather segment or whatever it is known to be really first rate, then your ability to sell against that on an ad side goes up. And so the ratings are important because the ratings tell you how much you can sell this advertising for. Just like if you're reading a newspaper, they do what's called impressions. They have the demographic for the people who read the newspaper, read a particular newspaper, and then for every word, there is a comparable price tag for it. And so you have the number of impressions, and the impressions have a dollar amount that's attached to it. And that's what your marketing and advertisers get to sell against.
Yeah. Now, and before I get to some of their questions, I do want to also talk about, you've covered Super Bowls, World Series, NASCAR, super big time sporting events. And you were doing that before really we had a whole lot of female reporters. I know Linda Cohn, Leslie Visser, some of those have been there for a while, but there was very, very few of y'all when you broke into it. So what type of spaces are there for females to get into sports broadcasting?
Yeah, so, I made some very intentional moves when I came back to sports as an adult, because I was an Olympian, and that's a wonderful title to have. And trust me, it has opened more than a few doors, but I didn't want to be known as just the track girl, who could only cover track. Now, with the delineation to say, if I'm going to do any kind of analysis, I'm only going to do analysis about track and field, because analysis is when you are sharing the information that people generally don't know. And there are things that I can tell you about the Olympic space or track meets that I'm very, very good at that because I've done lots of different events. But I'm not going to do that for baseball, even though I know baseball well. I'm not going to do that for football, even though I know football pretty well as also. So you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself with your experience. But because I do know those other sports, what I did when I got to the regional level, even before I got to the national level, was I said, I'm really not going to do track meets. So when people would reach out, thank you very much, I'm not going to do it. Or I would go to a track meet where I knew I could do some back channeling analysis just to get reps and get practice, but I didn't want to do it on air because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in that one space. So I had some really great supervisors and bosses that believed in me and believed in my work ethic. I had a vice president tell me one time, look, I can look at your resume and say you're probably not ready for the things that you're going to face working for our national affiliate. But I can look at your work ethic from your life, the things that you have accomplished. And what I'm willing to do is plant a seed. And I said, if you plant a seed, I will give you a redwood. And if you guys know a redwood is a tree that's so big. Some of them are even carved out and they have cars that run through them. So I was that serious about it. And if you're willing to do the work, you can enroll somebody in your vision of what's possible for your life.
Wow. Now I do have some questions I want to get to. And these are all ninth graders. And this first one, RJ Jones, and he's one of our multimedia students. Okay. So he's starting to get experience on the multimedia side. But this is a great question. He asked, what is the most challenging part of gathering information and developing perspectives about news subjects through research, interviews, observation, or experience?
RJ, okay. You know what I said? Your questions were great, Greg. No. Yeah. RJ hit it. Wow. I'd say the most difficult part of gathering information, and understand this, when I started, we didn't have an internet.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have an internet. So sourcing your information is critical, and having credible sources that you can depend on, whom you can believe in, and who will give you accurate information. So the thing about doing that is creating relationships. So actually utilizing your network, being a person that's trustworthy. So if I have a source that shared something with me that is private or could potentially get them in trouble, but it's a critical element of the story, they have to be able to trust me to say, okay, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this under cover of anonymity, and that you will use this as a story, and you will protect me as your source. So, my mom has this statement: how you do anything is how you do everything.
Wow, great quote.
So if you are trustworthy, then you will be able to get those sources to believe in you, to trust you, and to share with you the things that they have. That's one of the things that was kind of my, it was where I could plant my brand flag, was that they do this thing called market research on everybody that's on air. So they want to know, what is it about Leslie that makes people want to tune in? And they said, even though I was quote unquote pretty or attractive or whatever, I was very trustworthy. I was like the girl next door, somebody that you could sit down with, have coffee, and, just really chew the fat. And so that has always been my, sort of my stamp, my brand. But the thing that's great about it is that it's actually who I am. I am a homegirl, make no mistakes about it whatsoever. And because I love and I'm interested in people, even in situations where it's something that could be controversial, because that's who I am, they trust me to tell me things that they a lot of times didn't believe they were going to actually say on camera.
Oh, yeah.
Great question, RJ.
Garrett Brown. And he asked, how do you keep yourself calm when you know that millions of people are about to watch you?
You said Derek or Garrett?
Eric.
Garrett?
Eric with the E.
Oh, Eric. These masks. And by the way, I'm only not wearing a mask because I'm at home. So Eric, that's a great question. I look at it like this. If I'm talking to one person, or if I'm talking to 10,000 people, and I've been in stadium situations, there are times when like Fox was a licensee for one of the Super Bowls that I covered, and I was working for Fox at the time. So as a licensee, you not only do you get the interviews first, but those interviews that take place around the awards ceremony or the trophy presentation, they're happening with the entire crowd there, and you're talking anywhere from 50 to 100,000 people. But I always look at it like this. I believe that people are more on my side than not.
Absolutely.
And so I would always tell myself, everybody's on Team Leslie. How can you not be? And so when you're talking with friends, when you're talking with people that you know have your best interest at heart, it just makes it that much easier. So that's really how I approach it. And I try to really only concentrate on that one person. It's me and that person in that moment. And if I can make that person feel like they're the only person in the world, everyone else will feel it too.
That's awesome. What a great answer. This is Serenity Bolden Chesser, and she asked, have you ever been speechless while interviewing someone?
Have I ever been what?
Speechless.
Speechless. Okay, so Destiny, here's what happened. I don't get rattled.
Her name is Serenity.
Serenity. Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, Serenity. Thank you. Serenity. So here's what happened. I was at the All-Star game. I think it was 2003. You guys probably weren't even born yet, but I was at the All-Star game, and we were in the main hotel. So, you know, you got players coming through, Shaq, Kobe. I actually did an on-field interview or on-court interview with Kobe. But, you know, players are coming through and you're getting sound bites and stuff. Chris Webber walks in, and I had never met him. What I can say is, so see how white my teeth are? Serenity, this man has the whitest teeth ever. I mean, just like beautiful. Not 32 teeth. I think he has 36 teeth, okay? And so, you know, I asked him if he'd do an interview, and he's very tall. So I'm like holding my mic, but I'm actually holding my hand. And no, I didn't have my hand yet. So I have my hand up, and he's, you know, answering the question, and I'm looking at him and go, wow, he has really white teeth. Wow, he has really clear skin. Wow. And so then I see my mic is shaking, and I go, yeah, I got rattled. I also got rattled one time when I was interviewing Brad Pitt, and I realized in the interview that he was holding my hand.
I'm sure you hated that.
I hated it.
This is more of a technical question. This is Christopher Rugley, and he asked, how do you prepare yourself for when the equipment goes down?
Oh, Christopher. Okay, so you guys are working with green screens and teleprompters, right?
Yes, the ones that are in the Multimedia Academy are. Yeah, we have the teleprompter, green screen, and the cameras.
Okay, so keep an eye out for this. You'll see it on morning television every now and then, but you'll have somebody in there, they're, you know, reading their script, and it's all well and good. And then all of a sudden they kind of get this look on their face, and then they go down like that. And then they come back up and they continue reading. So teleprompters go down. Teleprompters go down. And what's happening is you have what's called your rundown, and it has all of your scripts on it. And you are, as you're reading through the teleprompter, you are looking down, and you're making sure that you're keeping time on your script with what's on the teleprompter, and you're actually flipping your pages. You're flipping your pages. So you can't really see it, but that's what's happening. So if and when that teleprompter goes down, you just look down and then you keep on reading. Okay. And that happens more often than you'd like.
Earpieces go out, lights go out. I mean, at the end of the day, it can always break down.
Yep.
And even with the advances in technology, I mean, I know since you haven't been live on television for a while, but even since then, it's changed drastically.
Yeah, it has.
This is Jaden Latiker, and he asked, who is the biggest celebrity you've ever interviewed?
Oh, Jay, wow. I would say the biggest celebrity that I've interviewed is well, you know, it depends on what your thing is. If it's movies, if it's sports. So from a movie perspective, probably Denzel Washington, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. Wow. From a sports perspective, I would say, oh God, that's a hard question to answer, because if anybody hears it, they're like, well, what about me? Serena Williams, wow. Love her. Venus. Lance Armstrong. Yep, I was one of the people that was a reporter when he had his moment. Barry Bonds. Yeah.
That Barry Bonds clip is hilarious, where you asked him about the check swing.
I either swing or I don't swing.
That was scary. This is David Ford, and he asked, what type of educational background would you need to get into sports commentating?
Yeah. All right, David. Well, you don't have to have your college degree, but you need to have your college degree. And here's why. College is, unless you are going to be a doctor or something that is very specifically skill-based, college is about putting a goal out there and seeing it to fruition. Okay, get that paper. Now, I don't know, Greg, if you played for them, my speech from the Hall of Fame induction, but I talk about how when I finished at USC, I still had 2 more classes to do. And it was years before I went back and did it. Now, it didn't keep me from doing the things that I wanted to do from a professional perspective, but there was always that narrative running in my background. Girl, you got to finish that. You know, my parents worked too hard for me to have opportunities. And granted, I was on a full scholarship. So, dude, it was free, finish it. So yeah, to become a reporter, producer, marketer, salesperson, you really do need to have your college degree. And actually for you guys, a college degree is more comparable to a high school degree when I was coming through. So I would actually say, have it in your mind that you're going to get an advanced degree. If it is a specific certificate in your field of study, if it is your master's degree or your PhD, but you want to be able to elevate your offering and to be able to come into a situation offering more than what the next person can offer. So it's both lived experience. So the experience of you in your life right now in Mississippi is important. It is important. And it is your educational experience, and then just your experience being out in the world, you know, making opportunities to travel and all of that. All of those things are a part of who you're offering up to any employer. So you want to make sure that you're positioning yourself to be successful.
Yeah, and you know, actually, in Mississippi, we have we have an HBCU and a PWI that have multimedia degrees, the radio, television, film degrees, and we have a community college that locally recruits our students from digital media to get into broadcast journalism as well on the community college level. So that's something
That's
in Mississippi. Yeah, we have it. You know, like I showed you the clip from we have it here at the school as well. But they also have the opportunity after high school to get into that kind of stuff. Now, one thing, you know, a lot of people, you know, they watch the Sunday night football and all the NASCAR races, NBA, all that stuff. How difficult is that to be on the road a lot? Because obviously the game's not in the same place every week when you're in broadcast. So yeah, a lot of people say they want to get into it, but then they don't think about how much traveling goes on with that. So how much travel goes on with it?
A lot. It takes a lot. And for me, because I came back to television after I had my kids already, I had to decide what winning meant. Winning didn't necessarily mean working for ESPN and living in Bristol, Connecticut, because that wasn't where I wanted to raise my family, and being on the road. And so you have to be really flexible, and you have to have a game plan in place, and you have to have support. Nobody succeeds alone. We exist in relationships. I help you, you help me, and together we're able to move things forward. So if you think this is something that you want to do, you have a vision, yes, but it's enrolling people, it's enrolling people in that vision to help you to achieve it. Because if you want to have a full life that includes family experiences and, you know, children, marriage, the whole 9 yards, then you're not going to be able to do that by yourself. And that is absolutely okay. It's expected. If you try and do it by yourself, you're making it a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
And also along the same lines, you know, I know like you said, there's small stations, and there's larger, you know, like the weather woman at WABC in New York actually got her start in Jackson. So we got to see her on the local level. And now she's in New York hosting Good Morning America. But how competitive is the national market? Because you hear a lot of kids say, I want to go work at ESPN. I want to go work at CNN. How competitive is it to break into those networks?
Yeah, it's extremely competitive. It's as competitive as you know it is. It really is. And how do you deal with that? There has not been a job that I have gotten in my life that I did not have some contact with somebody in that organization. So networking is important. And I talked about relationships in the beginning, how much I love people and that my network is sacrosanct to me. That if you all will develop your network and you can do things that I wasn't able to do, you have a whole big thing called the internet. So there's no reason why you cannot connect with practically anyone that you could work with in a future capacity. And here's the thing, you guys are young. And if you come to someone and you're clear about what it is you want to do, and they can be of assistance in that process, a kid that knows what they want to do is like catnip. You can't, as an adult, you can't resist it. It's like, oh, I gotta help this kid. I gotta figure it out. Now, don't go in there saying, well, I think I want to be in television. Be really clear about what your game plan is and what that roadmap looks like, so that they can say, okay, he or she has really put time into that and some thought and research. Let me put this thing in because it's going to be that next stepping stone that they need to get to where they're trying to go.
Yeah.
So relationships.
And obviously, we also want to hear about the what you're doing now, the Maxie Media Group. I know you're an entrepreneur now. So how important, these companies need media presence. So your background in television, how important is that now for these companies to have a media presence and have a media professional? And just talk a little bit about what all Maxie Media Group does.
Okay, yeah. Well, we train athletes, executives, and activists who are front facing to the camera or speak from the stage. So it's really drawing from my experience, both as an athlete, the subject in front of the camera, as a reporter, the subject in front of the camera, asking the questions, and as a producer, executive producer, and content creator behind the camera, and really pulling on all of those areas. The time that I worked with Red Bull as an international communications expert, working with NASCAR as a PR expert, these different things are all part and parcel of the work that I do now. And so it is primarily around speaking. I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret that's actually being unveiled on Monday, is that my gray hair that I'm now wearing as kind of part of my brand is really a part of the transition of the company. And so we're going to be focusing on women who are in my age category. I am 54 years old. I'll be 55 in January. If anybody wants to send a card, I'm here for that. But I'm 54 years old. And one of the things that I've learned is that, change is such a huge part of our lives, and even more so when you get older. And so to be that voice and to give voice to women in my age category is something that brings me an immense amount of joy. And so my company will be doing a lot more work in that space. So maybe Mr. Greg will share that with you guys a little bit later on, but yeah.
MaxieMediaGroup.com for anybody watching later. But Leslie, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, like everybody watching now, and like a lot of people watching later, and we'll have a lot of young ladies, and we have other minorities that'll be watching later. But everybody in this room is African American, with the exception of me, obviously. So you grew up in California, but you still you gave your age. I didn't ask it, but you grew up in California.
No shame here.
You look great. You grew up in California, but still you grew up Black and in America, and you have become gone all the way to a national sports anchor and reporter. So even if these kids don't want to get into television, even if they don't want to be involved in sports, what can they do now to be as successful as someone like you?
Yeah. I feel really blessed to have grown up in the community that I grew up in, with the people around me that were around me and that encouraged me. My coach, Mr. Parker, coached me from 6 years old to 22 when I retired. And he had at least one Olympian on each Olympic team from 1956 to 88, which I was his last Olympian. And Mr. Parker was a white man, and he treated me like one of his kids. If I was messing up, he let me know. And if I was shining, he would rub it a little bit harder. And he just was one of those people that poured into me that if I'm willing to do the work, that there's everything that can be accomplished. And understanding that in the times when I didn't get the nod, because those times did happen, he said, hey, this was not about who you are, it's really about them. So understanding that I will always be a Black woman in America, and the ability to share who I am, to show up in a way for people who maybe haven't had an experience with somebody Black, that they can walk away and say, wow, I didn't know that, or that was a really great experience, or, whatever, but that I can always represent myself and my community in a way that will bring pride and honor and differentiate the work that I do, and have people understand that it came from a proud Black woman. So be proud of who you are, be proud of how God created you, and don't be afraid of the hard work. Understand that wherever you go, there you are. So make sure that you're bringing your A game.
That is awesome. And again, we thank you so much. We're out of time, but again, thanks for making time for us. MaxieMediaGroup.com. And you're such an inspiration, and we thank you so much for making time for our young people today.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the questions. They were awesome.
Have a great day.
Okay, you too.